I love the camaraderie and I love how unserious it is. So when you're riding your sports bike, it's super fun, right? But it's pretty serious, right? If you mess up, it's all over Red Rover. But if you're riding your dirt bike, some days you might end up upside down like 20 times. Totally unimportant. And it's hilarious. It's this whole, mess around and find out situation, which I find really liberating.
Hey, adventurer. I'm Bridget Hallam from Throw Your Leg Over, and today I am really thrilled to be chatting with Grace McDonald. Now, you might know Grace as BikeHedonia. She is an Aussie living in beautiful Thailand. She rides dirt bikes in the mountains and the jungles, and she is also the co-owner of High Volt Motorsport. So, hi, Grace.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to get to come here and talk motorbikes, my favorite topic every day.
Fabulous. Let's do it. Now, before we actually get to the motorbikes, though, I want to go back a wee bit because you left your job as a commercial lawyer in Sydney to ride from Sydney to Paris. And I'd love to know that story. Why and what happened? Because you're not in Paris. What happened?
Absolutely. I am not in Paris, and it's kind of amazing how you end up in the place you're looking for, even when you don't know where it's going to be. So, I was a corporate lawyer, a stamp duty specialist. I was a regulatory litigator. It was all very corporate. Yeah, that was in Sydney, and I, worked in an office that looked over the harbour, and it was all very fancy. But I came from quite a different background. I grew up in the country. I never actually went to school. I did correspondence school, you see, distance education. We were quite a long way from the nearest school, and it was an interesting upbringing. And then when I was quite young, I left, I went to the city and I set about creating a life for myself. And I created this life, it wasn't all smooth sailing, but eventually I became a lawyer. I was an officer of the Supreme Court and I was an officer of the High Court and all of that great stuff. And I thought that I had created the life that would give me a sense of security. And, it would give me the platform to create some happiness and fulfillment. And it didn't actually work that way. So I proved to myself that I could do the hard thing. But then once I'd done the hard thing, I realized that it wasn't actually how I wanted to live my life at all. And so one day I really just hit a wall and I said, I'm leaving. I'm getting on my motorbike and I'm not coming back. So that's pretty much what I did. I spent 6 months just tying up the loose ends of my life. I got a secondhand KTM 690 Enduro because I thought, listen, I need a dual sport because I'm going to ride some places that probably don't have much in the way of roads. And I said, I'm going to ride my motorbike and just keep going. And ultimately, that was going to take me to the edge of Australia. So I thought, well, it's going to have to be beyond Australia, isn't it? So I planned my trip and, I headed north to Darwin and I shipped across to East Timor and started through Southeast Asia. But you see, people always kept asking me, where are you going? And it's quite difficult to explain that I don't know where I'm going. I'm just leaving. I don't have a plan, and I hope that I will find what I'm looking for somewhere along the way. People like certainty, people like a narrative. And so they would just keep asking me, yes, but where are you going? So I said, listen, I'm going to Paris. Because Paris is, number one, it's a long way from Australia. It's on the other side of the world. So I said to myself, well, that'll keep me busy for a while. At one stage, I did a year at university in Paris. And so, I said, listen, wouldn't it be nice? I'll get to Paris, I'll eat a croissant, I'll like do some wheelies up and down the Champs-Elysees and, bring down the tone of the place. And so that was sort of my plan. As long as people kept asking me where I was going, I would just tell them I'm going to Paris because they seemed to find that satisfying. In the end, I spent 3.5 years riding solo around Southeast Asia. I shipped from island to island. I didn't really have a lot of money. I slept in car parks and on beaches, and I met local people who would find my story interesting and invite me to their homes and their villages. And Southeast Asia is a really nice place to be if you don't know where you're going. And so, yeah, 3.5 years later, I was in Thailand and COVID happened. All the borders shut around me. It was like musical chairs. Like 1 minute, the music's playing and everyone's traveling, and I was going from country to country, 30-day visa to 30-day visa. And then the next minute, the music stopped. All the borders closed, and we were all like frozen in place. So that's how I ended up stuck in northern Thailand unintentionally. But the way things worked out was I ended up stuck in a very special place and I never wanted to leave again.
That is quite a story. I hear what you're saying about people wanting certainty, like people needing to know where you're going, but that was kind of the opposite of what you were doing.
Yeah, I guess one thing to think about with that is there's more than one way to undertake a big journey. Because you'll hear a lot of people talking about they want to ride around the world, for example, or they'll say, listen, I'm going to do, Sydney to London in 6 months. And some people, that's great, and they're on a schedule and they do it. Like you can do it. You get on your motorbike and off you go, right? There's some logistics and there's a fair bit of paperwork. If you're in a hurry, sometimes your paperwork's going to cost you more than if you have time to solve your problems along the way. But it's possible. You can ride halfway around the world in 6 months and it's no problem if that's what you're trying to do. But one size doesn't fit all. And sometimes having an epic adventure without actually knowing where you're going or why you're doing it is equally valid. And so I would totally recommend it.
I love it. And you're still there in Thailand, in beautiful Thailand. And I know that you love to ride dirt bikes. Tell me more about that. Tell me, what do you love so much about riding dirt bikes?
Well, so I actually wasn't a dirt biker until I got to northern Thailand either. When I lived in Australia, when I was a lawyer, I used to ride sports bikes on the weekend. We'd ride over the Blue Mountains and go and look for the curves. I was obviously riding a dual sport and doing some fairly shady tracks when I was traveling, but I wasn't a dirt biker because one of the things that you notice, I think, with dirt biking is that it's not a solo sport. You need your friends to pick you up. It doesn't matter how good you are. Doesn't matter if you're Graham Jarvis, you're always going to fall over at some point, which is totally normal and fine. It's not a big deal at all. But if you fall over in an awkward spot and you slide down the ravine or something, you need your friends to come help you drag the bike back out. Dirt biking's not a solo pursuit. And I didn't have people around me who were into dirt bikes, and it's kind of hard to start on your own. So yeah, in my earlier life, I was a sports bike rider because I could just do that on my own. I went down to the motor registry, I got my license, I looked on Facebook Marketplace, I found a bike, I bought it, I rode it, and that was it. But dirt biking, it's something you do with your friends. And so to come back to your question, what do I like about dirt biking is I love the camaraderie. And I love how unserious it is. So when you're riding your sports bike, it's super fun, right? But it's pretty serious, right? If you mess up, it's all over Red Rover. But if you're riding your dirt bike, some days you might end up upside down like 20 times. Totally unimportant. And it's hilarious. It's this whole, mess around and find out situation, which I find really liberating. You just get out there with your friends, you end up upside down. Everyone laughs, they take a photo, then they help you up. And it's just hilarious and unserious, which is such a difference to the way I was brought up. Being a lawyer, for example, you're not allowed to make mistakes. You're not allowed to mess around and find out. You need to know what the answer is before you start. And you need to end up where you think you're going as much as you possibly can. Whereas being on a dirt bike, you learn by messing up. You learn about physics by pushing it and seeing what happens. So you end up with a whole bunch of friends. You end up doing something that brings you together with people who you may not have a lot in common with, but as long as you both ride dirt bikes, like this is not an issue. Because it's the universal glue, and it's just everything is hilarious. And if you sort of grow up or you work in a fairly serious kind of context, maybe you're not used to like taking risks and feeling confident about that. Dirt biking is very healing, honestly. You get out there, you mess around, it's hilarious, the consequences are unserious, and everyone has a good time.
Is it also, I'm getting the sense that there's a feeling of freedom as well with that,
Absolutely.
because you're not locked into anything, you don't have to do anything, you're just mucking around and having fun.
That's it. You know, your inner feral child is really going to enjoy dirt biking. I get so excited as well when I see people getting their kids into dirt biking, especially when I see people getting their daughters, their little girls into dirt biking, because I say to them, even if your daughter grows up and she's like, oh, you know, dirt biking's not for me, or she's interested in other things, that's totally cool. But you get her out on a dirt bike, fanging around the bush when she's a kid, and she's going to grow up knowing that she's strong, that she's capable, that she can test the limits and she'll be okay. It's building confidence with risk management. And she'll also grow up knowing that anything those little boys can do, she can do just as well as they can, right? It's breaking down this barrier of, I think, confidence. Maybe it's my upbringing or maybe it's my generation. As a girl, I was brought up not to take risks. If you made a mistake, that was bad. We don't want to do that again. If you like fall over and damage something or tear your dress or something, that's bad. We don't want to do that again. It's sort of being brought up in a way where you're taught to avoid risk. Whereas I would look around and I would see little boys being taught very differently. They would be taught, well, you get out there, you mess around, you fall on your face, and we pick you up again. We say, good, try again. That's a really important lesson in resilience and feeling your own power. I think that's a really beautiful thing that you learn from dirt biking. And it's particularly important for women and girls, I think, because if we're not brought up to mess around and find out, maybe we miss out on a bit of confidence. And I want everyone to know that life can be seriously unserious, and you can do things like dirt biking, you can feel strong, and you can just laugh with your friends, and you don't have to always be worried about being perfect.
That leads beautifully into my next question for you, which is, what have you learned about yourself and life from all your adventures?
Well, I think the number one thing that I've learnt from my adventure, in terms of particularly riding for 3.5 years, you know, I was on my own. I didn't have a lot of resources. I was also pretty vulnerable. You know, I was looking for something. I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't really feel like I had a place in the world to start with. And so the thing I learned was that the world is full of mostly really, really good people, and that most people really just want the same things. We want to look after our friends and our families. We want to feed our kids. We want our kids to have a good life. And we want to be part of a community. There's always a lot going on in the world, and it's easy to sort of be distracted by, you know, big picture narratives that are being told about who's good and who's bad and what people really want. But when you break it down to the person who's sitting next to you as you eat your noodles in this little shack in Southeast Asia, what do they want? They want to have a good time with their friends. They want their friends and family to be safe and happy and fed, and maybe they want to have a bit of fun in life. And that's about it, right? We're all kind of the same. And I found that living in Australia was very lonely. You know, I didn't come from Sydney. I didn't go to like the same private schools that a lot of my colleagues went to. I didn't have a community set up for me. I didn't have a lot of shared experiences with a lot of the people around me. And in Australia, I found it was very difficult to form new social networks. If you go and like sit next to someone in a bar in Australia and start talking to them, they might look at you sort of a bit funny and like wonder what you want. They're like, are you okay? Are you trying to scam me or something? So you sort of learn to keep to yourself a bit. And then when I went into Southeast Asia, I was, you know, this random outsider, and I did need people to support me. Every time I ever needed help, people were always there for me. People who didn't know me, who had no reason to help me except that I was another human being. They helped me with the deepest of generosity. And as time has gone by, I've seen that there is no catch to people's kindness and generosity. All these times when people helped me, they didn't want anything from me. There was no waiting for the other shoe to drop. They saw someone who was on a journey, whether that's, spiritual or physical or both, or they see someone in need and they want to help because we are all people. And it completely changed my brain because previously I lived this life where I felt like I had to be very independent. I felt like I always had to make sure that I was going to be okay because nobody else was going to come and back me up. If I didn't look after myself, I was toast. And that's a very stressful way to have to live your life. Once I went through this journey in Southeast Asia, where I sort of embraced what I was most afraid of as well, because I was always afraid that if I didn't have the resources to help myself, then I would not be okay. But as I traveled and, my resources dwindled, I put myself in that situation which I was afraid of. I was literally this homeless hobo with a motorbike. I could have been very vulnerable, but instead I was embraced and everything was okay. I proved to myself that the world did not end. There's always another tomorrow and there's always another opportunity. And there's a community there if you open yourself to be part of it. That changed the way that I saw the world, and it's changed the way that I live my life too. I'm so fortunate now that sometimes I'm in the position where I can be the person to help. Here in Thailand, for example, like you see people come here, they've never been here before, maybe they have a problem, or maybe they don't understand something. Like the other day, there were some people I met, and one of them was sick, and she had to go to the hospital, and they didn't speak Thai. And I said, well, just call me. And they were like, well, why would you help us? And I said, well, why wouldn't I help you? It's a beautiful privilege to now be the person who can sort of pay forward the generosity that's come to me. Yeah, transformative. I now see the world completely differently.
And can I say, it's been just an absolute pleasure watching that transformation. Like, I found you years ago through your writing. I think it was not long after you had left Sydney, perhaps. And I love your writing. I think it's exceptional because it feels like you just take me as your reader, you just take me straight into your world, like I'm standing in your shoes or your boots. And it's so beautiful. So if you're listening to this, please read Grace's articles because they're just fantastic. Like, they're heart-wrenching and funny and sad and they're everything. They're brilliant. So I'm waiting for the book to come out. Grace, as we wrap up, I wonder if you could share a tip with our wonderful listener if they are thinking of maybe riding dirt bikes or riding in Southeast Asia or Thailand. What would you say to her?
Well, I think the most important thing is to try and pick a situation where you're going to feel comfortable. So this is going to be different for everyone. But the thing with dirt bike, having a good time on a dirt bike, is you really want to ride with people who are going to back you up and make you feel confident. Sometimes dirt biking can be a little bit testosterone fueled, right? Like, I know of a lot of people, they've gone out and they've had this experience where they've sort of been thrown in the deep end. Maybe the guides or the people on their tour are trying to show off. They want to show, how good their wheelies are and, just how manly they are. And it can really just like ruin your day a bit because not everyone wants to ride like that. Not everyone wants to go everywhere on one wheel and just like make everything into a competition. When I run tours with women, we tend to have really, really supportive vibes. I find that women can be like fantastic at being each other's champions. And that's the environment that I want to be available. So if you like to race and you want to race these boys and like knock their socks off, absolutely, like pick that tour. But also know that if you want to ride in an environment where we're out to support each other and have a fantastic time and upskill our riding and do hard stuff for sure. but it's an environment where you're going to feel supported and it's going to be pitched at whatever level you want it to be pitched at. I think it's so important to know that those options are out there. So that's what I try to provide. I try to make sure that anything from dead beginner to hard enduro, we can scale it up, but we can do it in a way that's going to leave everyone feeling happy, confident, and just coming away being like, that was awesome, as opposed to feeling like, I didn't enjoy that. People were pushing me out of my comfort zone. People were behaving in ways that made me uncomfortable. One of the things I do is I also like to teach women to ride dirt bikes. So I actually have this whole series of bikes, right? We start with like a 110, we go up to a 140, then we get to the 300. They're like different weights, different heights, and all the way up to like the 300 two strokes, which are the hard enduro bikes. So I have the ability to create whatever situation is going to allow people to upskill in comfort and confidence. And that's my thing. That's the thing that I'm most proud of creating here in Thailand. I feel like I can create environments which are going to bring out the best enjoyment that you can possibly get out of dirt biking. That's my number one tip. My number one tip is know that the environment you want is available. Don't feel like you have to like sign up for something that might not suit you.
I love that. And I think that's sort of a broader thing as well in life, is just find your tribe. Find where you belong, where people will support you and lift you up, and where you can also support them and lift them up.
Absolutely. That's it. Because honestly, nothing makes me happier than seeing the smile on someone's face when you level up, you conquer something you thought you couldn't do or something like that, and you realize like how much you just enjoyed it and how you just feel the top of the world. I see that on other people's faces, and I just think this is the best job in the world.
Thank you, Grace. It has been just a joy chatting with you. And I want to say thank you for being you. I know that sometimes I see myself in you, and that is a wonderful thing. So thank you for inspiring us and sharing your highs and your lows and your vulnerabilities and your humor, making us laugh, even when things get a bit difficult and tricky. And thank you for your beautiful writing. I love that so much. Now, if our listener would love to follow you or maybe is enticed by the sound of those tours, how can she find you?
For my blog, you can find me as BikeHedonia. For my tours, you can find me as High Volt Motorsport. So if you go to High Volt Motorsport, it's HIVOLT, High Volt Motorsport. We're based in northern Thailand. And you'll actually see that we have tours, we have a hotel in Chiang Mai, we have spare parts. If you've got like a KLX 230 or something like that, I can make it really good. I have many little arms to my business, but basically anything in northern Thailand to do with motorcycling or having a great time here, I'm here to help. Just reach out to me. Yeah, I'm all about community. I'm all about making sure that everyone, and particularly women, everyone who enjoys dirt bikes, I want us to like stick together. And there's always an easy way and a hard way to do stuff. And I'm here to make sure that when you come to northern Thailand, we do it the easy way and we have a good time doing it.
Love it. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight.